Hey guys, thanks for checking out another episode of Inside the Mind, a podcast about athletes. Today's episode is with Peter Gray. He is a head athletic trainer down in the state of Kentucky. We talked a bit about his own personal athletic experience and how it's shaped his job currently, as well as kind of some factors that play into burnout in athletes. But before I spoil too much of it, roll the intro.
I've been able to use my past history of being a young athlete that, when I was young, I had aspirations and dreams that I was going to one day, play professional sports. And I think when you're a kid, and I think mental health and everything like that for all ages, from young to professional athletes, like they all have different struggles. And when you're looking at injuries, most of these athletes, either they haven't dealt with injuries, so it's just kind of an unknown to them, or they've struggled through some injuries, and if you've gone through it, you realize there's a lot of people that need to be there to support you and kind of get you through these injuries, that brings you to, where you eventually end up, either moving on in your career of athletics or into something else. But when somebody gets injured, it's not just one person. For kids, it's a lot of time their parents, and now that athletic trainers are at more schools, events, I'm an athletic trainer at a high school that's there from before the bell rings to I'm pretty much the last one there after practices. So I'm there all the time, and I get to build relationship. I get the opportunity to build the relationship with these kids. I'm always there. Probably see them more than a lot of their coaches, especially if they're injured, or a lot of their parents, especially if they have busy schedules. And then I'm kind of, the middleman between the hospitals and the doctors and everything like that. So injuries, as an athletic trainer, you're pretty much the middleman for everything. I'm communicating with the athletes, how they're doing. I'm communicating with the parents. I'm communicating with the coaches. I'm communicating with the doctors if they had been seen in clinic for an injury. So there's just so much involved, and I'm glad that we're doing this podcast, and I really like all the stuff that you're doing, because it's kind of, there's this big push coming for sports psychology and mental health, and it's definitely coming. I think what you're doing is definitely a great thing to have. Yeah.
When at a high school, are you just specializing in one sport, or are you covering all the sports at that high school?
Yeah, so I am the head athletic trainer at one of the largest high schools in Lexington, Kentucky. So we have probably over 600 athletes. It's me, and since we work in conjunction with the University of Kentucky, UK Healthcare, orthopedic surgery, and sports medicine, we get kind of what they call a graduate assistant athletic trainer. So an athletic trainer that has completed their undergraduate, past the BOC, so they can be an athletic trainer. They're certified and they're licensed, but they're also continuing their education with a master's degree from the University of Kentucky. So they kind of split between covering middle schools and covering the high schools. And I will say this fall, and most of the time, pretty spread thin. So I'm working pretty long hours, working, I would say, really hard. And, but the benefit is, being there for these athletes, building these relationships. And, you really, when you, I've worked with a couple big time injuries, ACLs and things like that, and work them back safely and properly. Um, and just knowing that everything is kind of done right, to my standard, and to, what standards should be for sports medicine, even at a high school, because it's all about resources. Some high schools don't even have an athletic trainer, and some high schools have a couple athletic trainers. And college levels, obviously, you get more attention and everything like that. But you can really make almost the biggest impact with these high school age athletes, I feel.
Right.
So that's why
Yeah.
that's kind of why I came into the high school setting.
Yeah, they're kind of at that age where they're so impressionable. They're not too young that like they can't really understand what's going on in the realm of bigger picture things with sports injuries and stuff like that. But they're kind of right at that perfect time where you can kind of, not necessarily mold them, but kind of show them, what's correct and what's not correct with regards to sports. Of
Right,
course,
and you're
yeah.
basically setting a base for their whole athletic career. So if you can
Hmm.
get to them at a young age, and if I can teach them some preventative injuries exercises that they can use throughout their career to be injured less, or even if it's their first time getting hurt. And I see this a lot. If an athlete, if it's their first time, they react totally different um, than if they've been hurt before and they've dealt with it. And it's either a good or a bad thing. So it's like, if an athlete is hurt and they've gotten the proper treatment from an educated athletic trainer or seen an orthopedic physician or anything like that, they pick up on kind of how the process goes and the injury and healing process. They react differently to the injury itself. They have a base of, I wouldn't say knowledge of the injuries, but their reaction is just different, and they kind of treat the subsequent injuries differently based on how they handled their first injuries. Um, and really, some of the more worse off athletes are the ones that, they pushed through ankle sprains when they were young, and now they have chronic ankle sprains, instability and pain and all this stuff. And it's like, those are the ones that are much harder to treat than just an acute ankle injury. First time spraining it, we properly rehab it back and they're strong, and we don't see them anymore because we worked on the proprioception. They went back after after their ligaments were actually healed, versus like, I'm just going to go back, it might be a little swollen still, and didn't do any strengthening or balance exercises. So and then eventually they just get injured and injured and injured, and then get some burnout, and then we get some more mental health issues there with all that and injuries and everything like that. So it's definitely very complicated. But going back to what you said, impressionable, absolutely, and just building that base for their athletic career.
Yeah, I think one thing that you mentioned that's really common with athletes, myself included, that I've experienced, and all my friends and whoever, even seeing the pros, is when you're injured, it takes a lot out of you mentally to kind of take a step back and trust the rehab process. You obviously, like athletes and whatever, they want to get out there back right away and play. They feel like they're missing out. They feel like their skills deteriorating when not out there. So when you have an athlete at the high school level that just had an injury and they can't push it to the full extent they want to, but they do want to, and you're kind of there, almost in like a tug of war. How do you manage those situations?
Well, I mean, the word that I'll emphasize is with what you said is trust. So with this is my fourth year at the high school that I'm at now, and the trust that I've built with the athletes now and the coaches is much more than that first year when I first started my job. You have to build that trust and relationship with everybody, and now it's a little, if I know the athlete, things go a little bit more smoothly. If I have to, go through this process as I'm building that trust with the athlete, it's a little different. And every situation is a little different. You need to handle it a little differently. But if I have that trust with the athlete, and they know that I have their health in mind, but I'm also a past athlete that's competitive too, and I understand that they want to be out there for their teammates, not just for themselves, um, and they want to be back there as soon as possible. So my philosophy has always been, trust me, and I'm going to get you back there as soon as possible, but you're going to be back there performing, as you should be, and you're going to be back there safely.
I'm just curious, what sports did you play growing up that you said you were getting pretty competitive with?
Right. So I grew up in Wisconsin, and I went to a small high school. I've actually played 3 sports, and I was a very active kid. I grew up on a farm. Um, I kind of joke and say one of my ways to get out doing farm chores was to play sports. So I played in camps all summer long, played a bunch of different sports growing up. And then when I hit high school, I was mainly a football, basketball, and track athlete. And then, you know, when you're young, you don't really know what your life's gonna be like, and you kind of think like, well, I'm good at sports. I think this is, I love playing sports. This is kind of what my future is gonna be. So I put a lot of my effort into being an athlete. I'd say I was still good in school and everything like that, but before I got hurt, I was a junior on the football team playing running back, and ended up tearing my ACL on a play. And we can talk all about kind of my own mental health and sports psychology stuff of my short high school athletic career, getting injured myself. Um, but I kind of went through an ACL injury as a junior. I was very driven. I rehabbed back and actually ran track that junior year, and then had a very active summer, and played football again as a senior, and then re-tore my ACL on a contact kind of drive to the basket and jump stop, and re-tore it my senior year. So that really, I mean, all those surgeries and rehabs that I went through with tearing my ACL twice in high school really kind of got me thinking about sports medicine, thinking about athletic training, being involved with teams, and being there. Really, and I didn't think about this till kind of like later on. I mean, what I went through as a high school athlete, you go through these injuries, you absolutely feel isolated. You feel like those are dark times for high schoolers. When sports are everything to you, it's taken away from you pretty much, and you feel like you ask the question like, why did this happen to me? That you feel really isolated. You're away from your friends, your team, and I was like, wow, like, I made it through this. It wasn't easy. I want to get into athletic training, and athletic training gives me the opportunity to take what I learned, what I went through, and help other kids that go through the same thing as me with ACL injuries that are, year-long recoveries, other injuries. And athletic trainers gives me the opportunity to build these relationships, get these kids to trust me, and I get to use basically my experiences and then my knowledge as an athletic trainer to really help these kids get through these situations and kind of thrive through them. It's not easy, and you're never going to get somebody to think the same way as you, but you can get them to trust you. And by the end of the journey, everything is much better when you have the support of somebody that's been through it already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask, how much do you think kind of going through those personal experiences yourself, not only for you, but maybe just the field in general, how much does that help the athletic therapist then, turn around and kind of on the other side of the table, then help out other athletes?
Right. I always felt that I kind of had a little leg up on my classmates and and some other athletic trainers. I think a lot of athletic trainers are, they've been athletes before. But one of the biggest things I felt like was I just kind of realized, like, I ran track in college as well, and I had that feel of like what an athlete needs and wants as far as like attention, medical attention, and how they think and all of this thing. I think it really gave me a leg up on athletic training. Athletic training came pretty natural to me. Like, you really can't take for granted like just the communication that athletes have, how they communicate, how they think, and everything like that. And I kind of had what I would say is like an in. Like, I was kind of already in. I was like a kind of former athlete, kind of knew how they thought, knew what they needed, and then I had been injured, so I kind of knew how to approach athletes when they're injured and everything like that. And I think it really benefited me going into athletic training and everything like that.
Yeah, I know. One thing that I kind of stumbled upon when I was reading through your articles is you talked a lot about athlete burnout, specifically, playing one sport versus multiple sports as a child or a teenager. I was curious kind of where your motivation for writing that article came from. Was it kind of personal experiences that you saw? Was it something that you personally experienced yourself?
Right. So it's kind of a trend that's been going around as far as um, some sports have gotten big time off season club or um, AAU and things like that, where the stigma is you need to play this sport and you pretty much need to play it year round to get this exposure and all of this. And there's definitely research out there, and I think my knowledge of it came more when I got my master's down in Alabama, um, and it was kind of a hot topic. And I went to a conference in Emory, at the Emory Hospital in Georgia, and they were, it was a very hot topic at the time, and they talked about it a lot. There's research that shows, obviously more overuse injuries when you're just playing one sport. There's research that shows all of this burnout, and you see it. I see it in the high school setting. Usually, it's the soccer player that plays year round. It's the volleyball player that plays year round. They don't have any, and I was reading about this not that long ago. One of the main points is they only play volleyball, and they usually don't even have a strength and conditioning program in the off season. So you're gonna get worn down. You're working with the same coaches. A lot of times you're playing with the same athletes, and everything is kind of too monotonous. Not only are you getting, you're using the same muscles on your body and kind of getting some overuse tendonitis is going on, which is kind of the injury side of the sports specialization, but also, how frustrating do you get when you do the same thing over and over and over again, working with the same coaches, playing with the same athletes? I think people definitely need breaks. Not saying that nobody should specialize, but I feel like when you are playing different sports, you're playing with different people, you're going with different coaches, you're learning different movement patterns. Usually you're exposed to different strength and conditioning programs with different sports. Everything's a little bit different, so you get less burnout, and usually less overuse injuries and things like that. Now, not every athlete is the same, but I'm definitely, my experience was, why not play every sport? But I was also a little bit more, I felt like I was athletic. I went to a smaller school, so we just kind of all played all the sports. And, it was different for me when I went down to Alabama and when I'm here in Kentucky when I'm at a bigger high school, and everybody, you know, some of the athletes here play quite a few sports. Some of them only play one. Um, and if you are just playing one, I think a strength and conditioning program where you're actually, uh, working on movement patterns of the whole body and building strength so that you aren't just overusing different, arms, extremities, upper extremity, lower extremity, and things like that. I would say, I mean, if you're going to play one sport, you definitely need a strength and conditioning program, and you definitely need a break.
Hmm. I think one thing that is kind of um, almost like a generalization by the public is that if you want to go pro in a sport, you have to devote 100% of your time to that sport. But in
Right.
reality, it's not really, I mean, every athlete is different. And I mean, numerous athletes in history that have gone pro in both sports. And then, some big name athletes, somebody like LeBron James that played basketball and football in high school, or, somebody like Jimmy Graham or Antonio Gates that played basketball and football in high
Right.
school. It's more so, I think athletes need to kind of come around and just kind of follow what makes them happy at the time. Don't kind of be hesitant to try another sport out just because you think it's going to take away time from your other sport, because if you have that talent there, it's going to stay there for your main sport. But don't be
Right.
afraid to
I
go
think
out and try other
there's definitely
sports. Yeah.
there's definitely a base of athleticism that you get from learning different movement patterns with different sports. And another thing with sports specialization is all the travel and cost and everything that goes into AU and club sports. Kind of studies have shown that a lot of these lower income athletes are not being involved with these sports because they feel like, you know it's needed, like you said, it's needed to go to the next level, to spend the money to do all this travel ball. um, but in reality, I think, if you have the talent, there shouldn't be these limitations as far as like income and travel ball. I mean, there shouldn't be limitations. If you're a young athlete and you want to play sports, you should, you know, play sports. You shouldn't feel like there's limitations because of all this specialization and equipment that you need and traveling and everything like that. Because I mean, from my experiences, um, when you're a young athlete, you want to eat healthy, be healthy, have a great strength and conditioning program that helps you in your off season, that helps you during your season, and you want a good relationship with your athletic trainer and your coaches. So some people enjoy the club scene and the sports specialization scene, but I really, I'd push kids to try a lot of different things and find resources that you can trust. Don't just pull your resources from Instagram, or people that want you to buy stuff. Like, I don't feel like you have to spend money to be a high school athlete or to go to the next level for sure.
Mhm. In the high school setting, what are kind of some of the signs that kind of show you that an athlete is, on the verge of burning out or is already there? And then as an athletic trainer, because I mean, it primarily, you're dealing with the physical aspect of the sport. So what is then your reaction when you kind of see these behaviors?
Yeah, so definitely during a long season, we'll see quite a few kids just kind of get overwhelmed, and I think it presents in the training room as these kids are very overwhelmed with the athletics. They're very overwhelmed with school. They can be very overwhelmed with how things are going at home. And the main thing is, when these kids come into the training room, or if I see them out at practice and they have this look on their face, just ask them how they're doing. Try to actually get some information out of them that is useful. Like what's the problem? Is it because they're physically getting worn down and starting to feel sick, and they are just overexhausted and need some good sleep. Um, if I see a kid that's kind of dragging and not looking their self, I'll definitely try to talk to them and see what's going on. If they need an excuse out of one practice because they're just not feeling great, I'll definitely be that excuse, because I think they need that. Now, if a kid just wants to get out of practice for no reason, like, you need to be able to read them and say, like, look, if if a kid needs it, absolutely. If a kid doesn't need it, and it's a hard thing to do, and that's why, as an athletic trainer, building the relationships is so important. Knowing the kids is so important. Everything is so subjective and difficult, because you can't give special treatment to anybody. But some kids are absolutely feeling burnt out, and they just need a rest day, or they just need to go home and sleep, um, or they just need a little bit of time uh, away from their sport.
Mhm.
I don't think that's like the end of the world if a kid has to miss one practice because they're just not feeling it. They might have had a tough day at school. They might have had a terrible day a terrible time at home, anything like that. It could be anything. And, they shouldn't feel forced or stuck at a practice when they aren't feeling up to it. Um, and some people would say that, you know, these high schoolers, these student athletes have it made. They're getting soft, all these things. And I think we're just kind of, we're picking up on more things, we're sensing more things, and we're getting overloaded with way too much. And really, life is a balance. And, you know, if I can advocate to a kid to take a rest day, you know, and I try to help them out as much as I can, as far as like being a resource for them, as often as I can, um, helping their bodies with active recovery. So it's not just like I feel super sore and overwhelmed that way. It's like everything is piling up on me, you know, take a day off, um, and take some mental rest. I mean, usually, usually most of these student athletes that can manage their time well, um, are good in their classes. They don't really get overwhelmed. Most of them can handle everything that's thrown at them, which is great. But everybody's not the same. And everybody has those days where things just get overwhelming. You can take on too many tasks. You can just have had a bad day, and it's just overwhelming. Uh, I like to, just tell the kids, like, hey, this is okay. Like, it's okay to feel this way. Let's start fresh tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. We'll come back at it and bring your best self.
Yeah, I think that mental health issues with athletes should be approached the same way as physical issues or physical injuries, where if you have a kid that, sprained his ankle or something, you're going to recommend that they take the short term time off, in order to prevent long term damage. And I think it has to be the same way with these mental situations that kids are in, where it's better to take the couple days off immediately and kind of resolve the situation, rather than let it, ignore it, or kind of tell them to push through it, and then it develops into, it's unpredictable what it can develop into. But it's more kind of rather be safe than sorry kind of scenario, I think.
Yeah, I think you made a good point, where short term off versus long term, because if these athletes continue to ignore, and be like, just fight through, that's where that burnout comes. Is they get just fed up. They've been dealing with you know arguments with their coaches, with their teammates. Everything is just overwhelming. They get fed up, and then they just call it quits. they're not having fun anymore, they don't want to be out there. So short term, and I don't think they should just like, it's not like let's take the day off and you go watch Netflix. It's like, work on yourself, catch up on your homework, do something that you can find some mental clarity and be productive with everything like that, and so that you can start the next day and feel better versus like, you can't just take yourself away from it and do nothing for yourself. You definitely, like you said, with an ankle sprain, take that short time off and work on that injury.
There has to be a rehab part of it,
right.
like almost like mental rehab and physical rehab can kind of
Absolutely.
be related in some way. Yeah. Man, before I let you go, I want to ask you a question. I know you said you grew up in Wisconsin. I hope that means that you're a Packers fan.
Oh, go Pack, go.
There you go. How good? I'm a Packers fan too, but
Absolutely.
I wanted to just kind of touch on how good Matt LaFleur has looked the first 2 games of his Packer career, like the way he's called the games. The offense was, a bit shaky the first game, but that second game, that first quarter at least, they blew the barn door open kind of thing against Minnesota. But
yeah,
positive signs.
I couldn't be happier with honestly a 2-0 start, but just beating the Bears and beating the Vikings is
you can't ask for 2 better teams to be.
Absolutely, the Bears are good, the Vikings are good. 2 divisional opponents, we knocked them off. And the coaching has been great. I think the defense has looked amazing. I think the last game, Aaron Rodgers did come off the field and have some discussion with coach. I assume their relationship is great, and everybody gets frustrated here and there. But going forward, if we can have a lot of quarters like we did that first quarter versus the Vikings, I think we have a great team.
For sure. Have you ever been to Lambeau before?
Yeah, I've been to Lambeau a couple times.
Okay.
Haven't been there in a while. I would love to go back. And the last game I was at was I just remember it being. I went to a lot of Titans games back in the day, and then the last one I was at was a snowing game versus Pittsburgh Steelers, which is because it doesn't get much better than that.
Right. Yeah, I saw being from Canada, it's harder for me to get to Lambeau. I saw them twice in Detroit. Both times, though, Aaron Rodgers was injured. I think the one time he must have broke his collarbone. It is something during the game. And then the other time was when he was dealing with his concussion issue, I believe. So then last year I actually went. I was so hyped to go to Lambeau last year.
Oh, you did?
I did. It was the Packers-Cardinals game, the game that Mike McCarthy got fired right after.
Oh,
and
well,
so we were there.
You need a redemption game. You need to come back this year.
I do. We were there, and I remember Mason Crosby missed that field goal, and we were just all so pissed. And then me and my cousin got back to our hotel room. We were in forget the name of it's Appleton, I think it's called.
Yeah, Appleton.
Yeah, Appleton. We were there, and right when we got in our hotel room, we turned on the TV, and it's Mike McCarthy fired from the Packers, and we're like, wow. Mm-hmm. So it was still, it was a frustrating game to be at, but it was a memorable game in the Packers history where they fired him. So that's my Lambeau awesome. Experience. So I definitely got to redeem that either.
I think you definitely got to get back up there in the near future. And definitely keep me posted because I would love to get back to. I'm a little bit of a drive, but I would love to go to a game sometime.
Yeah. Have you been a Packers fan your whole life?
Oh yeah. So growing up in Wisconsin, you see just about everybody as a Packers fan. You get some random fans here and there, but everybody's pretty much a Packers fan.
Packer country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Hey guys, thanks for checking out this episode of Inside the Mind, a podcast about athletes. Once again, if you enjoyed any part of this podcast, please share it with your friends and family, and I'll talk to you next time.